First of all, present perfect, as any other structure, is explained in stages. So at the beginning, you get the simplest explanation of the tense. You get a set of instructions that make it easy for you to use present perfect. And at the beginning, it might sound something like this. It is used for describing experience that happened in your life, and you do not add any specific time in the sentence. So, for example, you could say something like, I have seen Titanic. Also, you can use it in a question. For example, have you seen Titanic? That is basically it. You do not say when it was, and it's clear that it happened sometime in your life. Now, you can obviously make it more specific later. You can say, for example, I have seen Titanic, I think it was 5 years ago. That's perfectly okay. Every sentence that we say is inside wider context. So this is perfectly okay, and this also. Now, if you say, I saw Titanic 5 years ago, that is the only way to go around it. You cannot use present perfect here. This is past simple. So once you go into detail, once you include the specification of time, you cannot use present perfect. So this is the simplest way to explain present perfect. Obviously, this is not all. And let's now dive into the logic of present perfect and why it is that we can use present perfect here if I talk about experience, and why I cannot use the present perfect if I talk about the same thing, but I only add more specific information. Because if you think of it, I saw Titanic 5 years ago. It's still my experience. So what is it? Now, if you have a look at this sentence, I have seen Titanic, what you are really saying is, I have seen Titanic in my life. And that's very important, because in my life and 5 years ago, that is very different. Let's change the sentence a little bit to make it easier to work with, and I will say, I saw Titanic in 2015, which means that we have two very similar sentences, and the only difference is here. The only difference is in my life and in 2015. And these two things at the end of the sentence actually make us choose the correct version, the correct tense. Now, if they are able to change the whole structure, they must be very different. And they are, aren't they? Now, what is different between in my life and in 2015? You might think that it is 2015 is more specific, but is it really? If you say in my life, well, it is, of course it is. But if you say, for example, something like this, radio was invented in the 19th century. Again, you use past simple. You would say 19th century is specific, but actually it's 100 years. And my life is 40 years. So actually, in my life is more specific than in the 19th century. And if you think of it, 2015, it's one whole year. So it's 365 days, which is, again, not very specific. So the specificity here is not the key, it's not the point. Also, sometimes students tell me that if you use present perfect, then you can do it again. But if I say I saw Titanic in 2015. I still can watch it. I can watch it tonight. So again, this is not the difference. So what is the difference? The difference is that my life is not finished. My life is open. 2015, on the other hand, is closed. And that's the only difference, really, if you talk about your life. Now, you are talking about something that happened during an open period of time. If you talk about something in 2015, it happened in a closed period of time. So, this is why it is so difficult to understand. We have two things to think about the real activity that we are talking about and the period of time in which it happened. So let's go back to the first sentence that we had here, and it's I've seen Titanic, and this rectangle represents my life. It started in 1980 and is going to finish 2081. That's my plan. This line represents now. If I say I have seen Titanic, I can use present perfect because my life started in 1980 and it hasn't finished yet. But the fact or the activity of seeing Titanic is actually finished. It happened somewhere here, but that's not the point. That's the difference between the between English and Slavic languages. We don't have that. We would just say I saw Titanic in my life, and that would be actually okay in English too. Like it's still alright. It's just that British English tends to use present perfect much more in these cases than American. But if you're not sure about that, just use past simple, and that's cool. But anyway, we're talking about present perfect simple today. So if you say I saw Titanic last year, now you are saying something very different. You are saying that you saw Titanic somewhere during this period of time, and during these 365 days. So this period is finished and you cannot use present perfect, and that's basically the whole magic. It's not about the activity, because in both cases it's finished. What we have to focus on when we choose between present perfect or past simple is the period of time into which we insert the activity that happened. If the period of time into which we insert the activity is closed, if it is finished, if it doesn't continue, we have to go for past simple. If the period of time into which we put this activity is still open, we can use present perfect. Now, if you think of in my life as an unfinished period of time, which it is, there must be more of those. There must be more unfinished periods of time. And of course there are. For example, you could say today is not finished, or this week, or this month, this year, and many, many more. Closed periods of time, of course there are plenty of them too, and like, I don't know, when I was a kid, or yesterday, or last month, or many, many more. Also, present perfect is very often used with lately and recently. So let's have a look now at some examples of those open periods of time in sentences. You could say, for example, I have had 2 coffees today. You could make a question, have you met Bob this week? Or how many times have you driven a car this year? All these examples are okay because you can use present perfect here. All these activities are contained in a period of time which is open. If you make it a question, the logic is the same. It's not that the activity really happened, but you are asking if it happened. So the logic is the same, just from a different point of view, from a point of view of a question. The same would be with would go for a negative sentence. You would say, I haven't had a coffee today. Yeah, it's the same. Today is still open, and the activity didn't happen, but it didn't happen it hasn't happened in the open period of time. So again, same logic, just a different angle, different perspective. And how many times have you driven a car this year? By asking this question, what you are asking is, how many times have you driven a car until now, until this point? Because the period of time is still going. So how many times have you driven a car until this point since the beginning of this year? And if you talk about the coffees, it's the same thing. You are saying, since the beginning of this day until now, I have had 2 coffees until now. And of course, if you change the time at the end of the sentence or at the beginning, if you say yesterday, then you have to change the whole sentence. You have to say, I had 2 coffees yesterday. Because, as we said, this is not an open period of time.